You're listening to School Counseling Simplified, a podcast with easy-to-implement strategies for busy school counselors. Here's your host, Rachel Davis from Bright Futures Counseling.
Raise your hand if you're ready to finally stop taking work home with you and actually start taking a lunch break. Or spend more time helping students, the reason you got into this profession, and less time doing stuff like bus duty. And if you're ready to finally use data to showcase the importance of your program and the progress your students have made. If any of those things sound like you, then I have got the ultimate solution for you, and that is my stress-free school counseling course. Now you may be thinking, wait, you've talked about this before. I have. So my stress-free school counseling course used to only be launched a few times a year, but now it is available all year long. And it is at a discounted price. This is perfect if you're the counselor who wants to work through it at your own pace. If instead of going through with a cohort and doing things together, you want to get to it when you can because you have a busy schedule. But first, let's see if you're even the right fit. Does this sound like you? You're a new counselor who wants to get started on the right track and not make mistakes and then redo things later. Or maybe you're a veteran counselor and you're feeling burnt out. Or maybe you're just a counselor who feels overwhelmed and stretched too thin. It's so hard to do all the things at once. Or maybe you're a counselor determined to change your program from reactive to proactive. Well, you're in the right place. Stress-Free School Counseling is totally for you. It's a 5-module digital course. So what that means is you get to watch video modules of me talking to you, just like I do here on the podcast, and teaching you in different areas like scheduling, organization, data collection, advocating for your role, and handling pushback. If this sounds like something you may be interested in, if you're a lifelong learner and can't wait to improve your counseling program, you're going to love this. And of course, it's stress-free. Head over to stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/enroll to get started today. Hey there, thanks for listening to another episode of School Counseling Simplified. So to wrap up our November series, today I want to talk to you about handling pushback. So as you're making these big changes in your counseling program, you may start feeling more empowered to advocate for yourself more or to make changes, in your schedule by setting up some clear boundaries around communication. And as you do these things, you might be met with some resistance, right? A lot of times if you're working somewhere and people are used to things going a certain way and you come in and switch them up, especially if you're a newer hire, things can get a little dicey. So we don't want to step on any toes. We want to be respectful and we want to maintain those relationships with our colleagues that are oh so important and with parents, right? But we also need to be prepared to handle this pushback. So I want to talk to you today about how you can deal with unsupportive stakeholders. Because as you implement these new systems and advocate for your role, you may encounter some pushback. It's totally normal. You may even encounter pushback from yourself, like resistance. Like, oh, am I supposed to be doing this? I don't know. But try these tips to help others get on board. So I have 4 tips for you today. First up, share the purpose and goal behind what you're doing. So this is so important. The more we can communicate what we're doing and why, the better. So for example, parents will be more understanding about their child missing an academic class for counseling if they understand the value of the services you provide. But if they've never heard of you before, or they don't even know what the school counselor does, they're going to be like, no, I'm not signing that permission slip. I don't even know who this lady is. So how we can do that is by providing clarity around who we are, what we provide. We can provide this clarity at the beginning of the school year by doing things like a Meet the Counselor lesson, brochure, introducing yourself at back to school night. But throughout the school year, you can do this by displaying, your data on data walls throughout the school in high traffic areas. I have a data wall template that I'll link to in the show notes if you guys want to try that out. Or by, doing a weekly or monthly newsletter to parents on like an update on what the counseling program's up to. If that seems like a lot, you could just add like a counseling corner to a school newsletter that's going out. There's a lot of ways that you can really clarify who you are and what you offer and the services that you provide. And the more clear you can be on that, I think you'll find that people are more supportive because you're sharing the purpose and the goal behind what you're doing. Or maybe little things like when you send home a permission slip for a small group, having a personalized note saying why you think their student will benefit from the group. Or I used to do phone calls like, hey, heads up, I'm sending home a permission slip. I would love for your child to be in this group. This is why it's beneficial. That way they don't feel like it's a negative thing and they really can get the purpose behind what you're doing. And if you say this up front, via phone call or in an attached letter that's personalized. You get to do it on your terms rather than them kind of assuming something and then you having to defend yourself and your purpose. Okay, so that's step 1. Share the purpose and goal behind what you're doing. Step 2, use data and research to back you up. So I love data, so it's so important to track data and share the results so stakeholders can see the impact that you're making. So if you're getting resistance around, your principal wants you to do some non-counselor duties and you're trying to say no to them respectfully, if you don't have that data, it's going to be hard to kind of prove your point and back yourself up, right? But if you have that data, you can share, well, look at these changes I'm making. I think my time is better spent doing this. And that's being honest, right? It's not like we're just trying to get out of bus duty. It's that we honestly believe that we could be doing much better things for our school. Or maybe you have a teacher who doesn't want you to come in for class lessons because they don't think, that it's worth their time or it's a waste of time for their students. You can show them research and data that you've collected on previous class lessons and how the students have improved as a result of that. ASCA is also a great resource, the ASCA website, schoolcounselor.org. You can always find infographics and handouts on there so you can communicate the school counselor's roles and responsibilities. So that's just something good to have on hand. So if you feel like you're kind of struggling for the words, you can always refer to that or send that out to admin and staff. So my second tip, use data and research to back you up. Okay, for my third way that you can deal with unsupportive stakeholders is to find your allies and use them. So of course not everyone's unsupportive. You likely have a lot of colleagues who are your allies, who think what you're doing is amazing. I know many of you have shared that your principals are on board. I've been blessed to have principals who've been super on board with what I was doing as well. So find your allies, find these people who are in your corner and use them. Collaborate with them, work closely with them, and see how you can work together to promote your counseling program. And then they can likely help others come around. So, I've had teachers who've taken advantage of my services way more than other teachers. So they'd say like, oh, hey, I had this issue in my class. Can you come in and do a lesson on this? Or, hey, can you come in and do an observation for this kiddo? Or, hey, can you give me some strategies because I'm having a hard time with this student's behavior challenges? And those teachers and I had a great relationship, and they really benefited a lot more from my counseling services than some other teachers who didn't even know. Perhaps they didn't know what I offered or they weren't interested. So again, this goes back to being really clear about who you are and what you do and the services you provide. That way people know what you offer. But then your allies will also help others come around. They're going to chat to the other teachers, right? Like, oh, I had Rachel come in and do a class lesson on cyber safety because I noticed a lot of my kids were being irresponsible online. And they'd be like, oh, what? She can do that? So again, that's another way that you can get unsupportive stakeholders on board. And finally, my fourth tip for you is to give grace. So just remember, teachers and parents may not be used to having such a proactive counselor. The role of the school counselor has changed a lot in recent years, and perhaps they don't really know like all that you offer, right? So if you come in there with a lot of gusto and sass and you're like, well, this is who I am and this is what I'm gonna do, that's not really the best message, right? Like we want to do this gracefully and we want to be kind and we want to be respectful because we really want to maintain these super important relationships with our colleagues and parents and admin. So give grace. Like I said, they may not be used to having a counselor who has so many ideas or who's so proactive. So you want to be patient and give them grace as they are learning your role, which brings me back again to clarity and communication. The more clear we are on who we are, what we do, and the services we provide, and the more we communicate this to our team and our parents that we work with, the more successful your school counseling program is going to be. Okay, guys, hopefully you don't need these tips. Hopefully you don't, encounter any pushback and everyone's super supportive of you. But it's likely you'll have a little bit, and now I hope you feel prepared to deal with it. If you haven't grabbed that freebie I've been talking about all month, I encourage you to do so. That's my Stress-Free School Counseling Toolkit. I'll link to it in the show notes. And this is Module 5 of my Stress-Free School Counseling course. In Module 5, we do a deep dive all about how to handle pushback from others and from yourself, and we talk a lot about that internal piece as well. If this sounds like something that you could use help with, or if you resonated with this episode, you're going to love that module, which is just one part of my 5-step framework for stress-free school counseling. Again, that's my course that I created to help counselors maximize their productivity so they can increase their impact and get the recognition that they deserve. If you're interested, find out more details at stressfreeschoolcounseling.com/enroll. Okay, I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening to School Counseling Simplified. You can find the links from today's episode in the show notes. If you'd like to connect with Rachel, she's on Instagram and Teachers Pay Teachers at Bright Futures Counseling. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes of School Counseling Simplified. Talk to you next week.